are producing something where obviously your range of vocabulary is not so familiar, what you can do first is to anticipate and give some keywords they are going to use. And then have students maybe ask 2 concepts, not more than that. Because if not, it's really exhausting on your part, and also it distorts the essence of what learning vocabulary should be. At this stage, I think we are going to incorporate the activities. So let's recap. In the first section of our talk, we recalled why reading is composed by both decoding words and comprehending language. In other words, when we take reading into the classroom, we are talking at 2 basic skills: good at language, good at words, and good at comprehension. Depending on your students' capacities, they will be placed in one or other of these quadrants in the diagram. Because reading deals with language, we should provide every possible instance in our teaching, in our planning, to combine reading comprehension also with listening, with speaking, as much language as possible, especially considering that on the one hand, the range and the exposure to language outside the classroom is limited, and outside the English lesson, for that matter. We also said that because of this, the purpose, why am I reading, what for am I reading, and the strategies are something which is not only useful, but absolutely essential in the process. And that as teachers, when we ask ourselves, what are we going to read and why are we going to read it, keeping in mind a well-planned curriculum where my expected learnings are very clear, that it means that as a teacher, I should cater for consistency, for coherence between the chosen text, the activities that I will use to teach it, and the outcomes. All these within the framework of systematic, ongoing drilling and feedback. In the second section, we have already seen how some of these concepts make sense in an actual classroom situation. And now we are going to see some activities and how from teaching strategies we are going to go to using these texts to teach reading comprehension at different levels. In this last section, we are going to emphasize the role of the teaching strategies, and we're going to illustrate them with some specific reading comprehension activities. There is a very important concept which is called the direct training strategy as opposed to the blind one. Now, it is very important that we don't confuse concepts. When we say that we are going to inform our students, we are going to make our students aware of what they are reading and why they are reading a certain text, so they, as independent, autonomous readers, can choose the best strategies, by no means are we implying that as teachers we should justify our decisions. The teacher is the master of the planning because they know why and how or what, obviously taking into account the feedback that we get of our own teaching and of our students' learning. What we mean by this strategy is that it has been demonstrated by very solid research in different countries of the world. So mind you, the language is not a factor, nor is the culture. Yeah, there are certain universals in learning, in teaching, and this one is one of them. Basically, if you make students aware of what they are doing and how they are going to do it, then it has been demonstrated that the outcomes are 99% of the cases enhanced. Let's have a look at a diagram that illustrates this quite clearly. So first of all, we have to be absolutely certain about the what for. As teachers, when we plan, remember, and when we implement, we have to be clear about this. There has to be consistency, coherence between the what for and the next stages. Why are we doing this? What for? To develop strategic. Notice the use of the term strategic readers. Elsewhere, I'm certain that you have come across strategic competencies, strategic skills, learners, etc. Well, here we want to help them become strategic readers and independent readers. How? By direct explanation. Explicit teacher. Now, in this case, again, it doesn't mean justify, but direct teaching, as we will see in a slide later on, has to do with engaging students in the learning process. That is to say, first you model and then you engage them, and they decide what strategies are better. Obviously, the younger the learners, the more directive that this reciprocal teaching should be. So the teacher will explicitly model and give feedback, extensive, intensive, ongoing feedback. And there is another approach to the how. And this is what we have been hinting and now explicitly emphasizing. We have to make students aware of the strategies. And that's why this is called informed strategy training. Students have to be aware, they have to be absolutely conscious of what the strategies are. Where, how, and when to use them. And in doing so, they are going to be equally aware of why they are useful and why they have an intrinsic and extrinsic value. This, my dear colleagues, is absolutely essential. It was only recently that researchers became themselves aware, sorry for being redundant, of the importance of making your students aware, particularly when it comes to teaching reading, but not exclusively. Making them aware of what, how, where, and when they are going to do things is vital. Hence, again, the relevance of the pre-activity and of something which might appear as rather domestic, but it's really, really cognitive. Starting the lesson with the lesson plan or the map, or very, very graphic reminders of what we are going to do in the lesson. Here we have a summary of the most important relevant comprehension strategies. Remember that we said that together with skills, strategies, purpose, and practice. So strategies. You will find them under different categories. Different authors will give you different names, but basically they can be grouped into the big ones, critical thinking, because obviously they are the more difficult ones to acquire, but it doesn't mean that you have to leave them for later on. On the contrary, as young as initial stage in your progress maps, they can be introduced. Predicting, when we have a text, I'm sure that all of us have tried that. So what do you think is going to happen? Maybe it's not even a written text. Can I remind you that text sometimes does not necessarily mean exclusively the printed text. For very young learners, it can be a visual text with a couple of words or letters. So what do you think is going to happen? What do you think is the character like? Inference. If we do this, then what's going to happen with this other thing? By the way, some authors discriminate between inference and prediction, but for the sake of clarity, both are two versions of critical thinking skills. Self-questioning or questioning in peers and clarifying. This is a crucial strategy not only for reading, but for study skills and for life skills in general. Story structure. At some point, we said that knowing some aspects, for example, of a story are important when it comes to a traditional story as a text. Sequencing is also important, and that goes hand in hand with your cohesive devices, with your connectors, your linkers. Well, teaching the basic